really try to focus on the organizations, nonprofit organizations that work to build up that community, build up that type of organization. So we work at different levels. I volunteer with organizations that tend to support young females growing up to be CEOs like the both of us. And I think working with organizations that give them that foundation early on really sets them in the direction, and they can actually see someone like me, someone like you sitting in front of them, and they understand there genuinely is a path. Because they're seeing the path.
Because you can be what you can see.
That's right.
That was Shannon Valladarez, the CEO and General Manager of Monterey Wine Company. This was an extremely inspiring conversation for me from a very personal standpoint, and I hope all of you feel the same. Enjoy the conversation. Shannon, welcome to This Is Ag.
Thank you, Kirti. I'm happy to be here.
I was really amazed to find out when we met the other day through the Women Ag session, and you said you've been with United Ag for 20 years. You've been members. You have the health insurance through United Ag, and this was the first time we actually connected in 20 years.
It's amazing. After all of this time. Yes.
I know. And the way you and I connected, and the reason why I wanted to invite you as a guest on this podcast, if you remember, this was, I think, a couple of weeks ago or a few months ago, we had a Women Act session. And when you were discussing something, I don't really exactly remember what it was, but you were making such good points on leadership, on how do you bring yourself to the table, that when I started listening to you, I was extremely curious and I wanted to know, who is Shannon? And I remember asking you that at that point. I'm like, what's your position? And we discussed that. And I said, where does this, the deep thinking and the way you're leading comes from? And I wanted to invite you. And so can you tell us a little bit about who Shannon is?
To answer your question, a little bit about Shannon. I have deep roots in ag. I was a granddaughter of a sugar beets farmer, and we grew up in the South County region, and my grandparents established themselves in this county decades ago, and unfortunately my grandfather died at a very young age, and he was only 50, passed away. That's my age now.
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
And it took us in a completely different direction. So we were left just women, my mother and my grandmother. And so I was raised by strong, independent women. I think that's really what
I can see that.
Yes. So that started the foundation at a very young age. I was only 2 years old at that point. So, I was raised with that influence. It was great. And as I grew up, I spent a lot of time in between, both with my mother and my grandmother. And then once I got married, I started my career, but I was like a lot of young mothers. This is another great part of my story. I was like many other young mothers that was going to school and raising children at the time. I believed early on that my goal, my drive was to be, a stay-at-home mom and finish my education and then go off and start a career. But life gets in the way, with many of us, and I found that we needed to have two incomes in our family. So I was going to school while raising my children, and I was really fortunate. After finishing that, I was able to start a position with a very large agricultural company in King City. This company had over 2,500 employees. I must say, in the beginning, it was very intimidating to start off with a company of that size. And I was working in personnel and HR, so establishing my foundation in that. And they worked with many of the local labor unions, some of the biggest labor unions. And it really set me on a path to develop negotiation skills, some of the leadership skills, and also human resource. And I was very happy there. That was my path. That was my direction. And circumstances changed. The company decided to shut down its California operations, and it sent me in a different direction. I could have stayed with that company in a different role, but I wanted to continue to grow. So sometimes circumstances that impact your life can cause you to make big decisions. So I went to work for another company that allowed me to get into sales and marketing. And I worked in that field for many years, worked with some very large accounts, Target and Walmart accounts like that. And it was
was that in ag? That was outside of ag?
Interestingly enough, it was with a decorative company that made decorative products from ag products.
Oh, that's interesting.
Very similar to dried wreaths made out of dried flowers, garlic, things of that nature.
So you still stayed connected to agriculture a little bit.
Yeah, I did. Okay. I love that environment. I love that culture. I just think that it's very family oriented. That was my comfort zone. I wasn't choosing to change careers, but life was sending me in a direction that is leading me up to where I am today. So I went to work for the local city government, and I went into economic development, giving me experience in the areas of expanding businesses and working with the economics of business at that point. So really establishing the foundation to take me into the wine industry. And how I ended up there is through economic development. The winery was one of my projects. So I was working to bring that facility into King City, into our local area, and developed a relationship with the partners and the owners of that company. Didn't know anything about the wine industry at that time. I just knew development, construction, and things of that nature. So when redevelopment started to change in government, where some of the funding started to fall off and drop, and I thought about making a change, not that I was concerned about my position, I just felt it necessary to perhaps maybe make a change and go back into ag. So I started to talk to some of the local ag companies and said, I think I want to go back into personnel and HR. And the winery heard that I was changing fields, and they said, come to work for us.
Oh, interesting.
So that's how I ended up there.
You are the general manager right now.
I am the general manager. I started out personnel in HR, and then over the years have grown into this position of general manager.
So when somebody outside of ag, when they hear that title general manager, they sometimes don't understand what that means. So isn't general manager like a CEO in a way, right?
I mean, that's in a corporation, it would be
that'd be a CEO.
Absolutely.
So that's awesome. So and then in every positions you've been at, you've kind of learned to be a CEO one day.
Right.
Correct?
So each circumstance that had caused me to divert in my career has really taken me on a path to this position. That's
an awesome story. And I'm sure if your grandfather would have been alive, he would have been so proud of you.
So proud. And very surprised as to where we ended up.
Oh, you said earlier that you were raised by your grandmother and your mom, so two strong female in your the way you were raised. Anything that you brought back to the way you lead, or that the way you are in a setting as a general manager, as a CEO? Anything that relates back to that, you think?
Absolutely. I think as females in general, I think we are connected more emotionally, and of course being raised by females, I think I look at every situation, every challenge from an emotional standpoint, not in a way that you become emotional about it, but you have feelings associated to the decision that you're making. A lot of times they encourage you not to do that, but I think it's very important to balance that, to be smart, use your education, use your experience and your background, but also keep that human aspect to the decisions you're making. And I think my upbringing has really made that possible. And I think especially in today's world, you see how critical that is, to really have a connection, emotional connection with somebody, because it really helps you when you're seeing somebody who could be in a completely different position than you are, from a lifestyle even to their career situation. You're looking at that situation from a standpoint of, I connect with you on some level, and you make decisions based on how that affects you, and it affects them as well.
One of the things that you had mentioned while we were conversing a couple of months ago was you do a lot of things outside of work. You volunteer, you're on boards and different positions. Any story that you can think of that kind of connects back to leadership and agriculture?
Definitely. I think because of the community that we live in, everything is tied to the agriculture in that area. So I really try to focus on the organizations, nonprofit organizations that work to build up that community, build up that type of organization. So we work at different levels. I volunteer with organizations that tend to support young females growing up to be CEOs, like like the both of us. And I think working with organizations that give them that foundation early on really sets them in the direction, and they can actually see someone like me, someone like you sitting in front of them, and they understand there genuinely is a path.
Because you can be what you can see.
That's right.
So if you can show them that this can be done, and if we set that example, I feel I do get emotional about this, because I feel if we are doing that, the others who are coming behind us, they know this is possible. Setting an example for the next generation of the girls coming behind us, it is so important, and I think we owe it to them, right? That is a responsibility that you and I should have,
right?
Because if we cannot show them that, then that's we are doing them a disservice.
Absolutely.
So I know you talked about an organization that you're part of, and so can you tell us a little bit more on how you work with these girls and how do you empower them?
Well, the one that I'm referring to is Girls Inc. And it's a wonderful organization. I've done a few presentations for young girls, and they work to do just that, really build up young girls in the community. And one point I want to make is living in an environment like this. We live in very small towns, and some of these girls are very limited to what they can even see, unlike a Southern California girl or, things up north. So they really have a very small perspective on opportunity. So to come in and talk to them about corporations or talk to them about insurance companies and the benefits associated to going to school, getting an education, or even if they decide to be young moms and wives, that they can start a path that leads them into a career that is very successful and they're very happy with. And if you don't open those doors and you don't create that opportunity for them to see beyond just the fields around our areas or the agriculture around our areas, which is wonderful, and they could build wonderful careers in that. But you have to guide them in that path. And in very small communities, that's a challenge. If you don't reach them, they're not going to reach out.
You're showing them a path. You're exposing or giving them different experiences to really understand that. That's great. That's awesome.
I mentioned to you that I went in with a presentation, and for some reason the title of Purpose came to me at that time, because you can imagine sitting in that room, very limited experience. They've seen very little, and sometimes in their lives, and asking them, "What's your purpose?" At that age in middle school,
they don't
know. They don't really have. And I said, that's such a good thing that you don't know what your purpose is. It really is, because life will define that for you. I talked about the circumstances in my life that changed my direction. And you'll get to a path in your life and you'll understand that's the purpose that I grew up in this small town, because now I'm leading this ag company. I am the food safety director. That the purpose of me growing up in this farming community is because I am now the food safety director, or, things of that nature. So really helping them understand you don't have to know what it is today, because that will define itself with hard work and the right leadership.
Going back to the Girls Inc., growing up in India, my mom actually had a women's lib organization. So it is slightly different than kind of the rah-rah kind of a thing. But what it taught me, what she used to do was to teach women to think differently. Like in India, you wear saris, right? You put on the red dot. She said just taking that off and not wearing a sari or wearing modern clothes or short skirts or whatever, that's not what makes you modern or not thinking deeper, but it's your thought. So she taught them, she said, change your thinking. Don't change the way you dress or look or whatever. That you have to do that's different. That has nothing to do with, right? I mean, your thinking has to change. That has stayed with me. And what she did for these females, now I feel like what you and I were talking about, feeling we need to give back. We need to create these pathways for others coming behind us, right?
Yeah, that's so amazing. And she was so right, because sometimes we're in the circumstance to where this is all we have. We have old shoes and rags, and if that's how you think and that's how you perceive your life, then your thought process is not going to take you out of there. That was so brilliant for her to teach them that.
Yeah, and that stayed with me, right?
What you wear and the position or your surroundings is not who you are. It's what you're thinking and the direction that you want to take those thoughts. Who you are and your knowledge and your skills and the things that you're bringing to the table, not what you believe the previous or what is expected. You know, you bring a new perspective to it.
So as we were talking, right, the imposter syndrome, I think, comes in a little bit because even you and I, when we grew up and when we took on these positions, we do not sometimes have a lot of role models, right? And so you don't know how is the female supposed to be as a CEO, or a different, let's say me as being an Indian immigrant CEO. What does that look like?
Right.
So maybe that plays into a little bit of the imposter syndrome, right?
Yes, definitely. I think oftentimes, especially in my field, probably yours as well. I know I've watched it through the years, but there really hasn't been a female in this role. And if so, it's very limited. So you don't really even know what that looks like. So you're trying to emulate perhaps the male version of that and taking on that stronger, more masculine type position. And it's really hard to succeed that way because that's not how we work and that's not how we operate. And that's why I made the reference to they're missing out on you at that point.
Exactly.
So we have to change the mindset and say, this is what a general manager looks like from this perspective. And once we do that, I think then they really get the full benefit of what we're bringing to the table. And the mistakes are honest mistakes. You own them then at that point. You're not making decisions. You're making decisions that are your decisions. So you can actually react to the error and correct it in a more efficient way because you understand that I made this mistake. This was not the right decision to make. And as a leader, I need to do better.
Sometimes when you come into different positions, right? So we come in and say, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to lead it this way, or I'm going to cut these number of people or create these plans or whatever. You come in with a set agenda. But have you found in your experience that when you do something like that in your role as a general manager or your role as any other positions that you've taken on, sometimes that might not work? Or have you, what has your experience been with that?
Absolutely. Fortunately, in this current position with the winery, I grew with the company. So, I was very familiar with the direction that it was going in. So I didn't have a predetermined agenda. But I've been in that situation. I've been in that scenario. Actually, it comes from some of the work that I've done in volunteer. I was, at the time, raising my children, and I wasn't really happy with the school system at the time, or certain things that were happening within the school system. And I wanted to become involved. I am a believer that if you have concerns, you shouldn't sit on the sidelines. You should get involved in and see what you can do to contribute, as opposed to just complain about the situation. So I did, and I worked to get on the school board, and I went in with an agenda. I went in believing that this is why they're making these mistakes. They're not spending their money properly. They don't have adequate staffing, et cetera, many things like that. And I had an agenda, and I was going to go in and I was going to fix it with those terms. That was my agenda. But once you get in there, in any circumstance, once you get in a company, let's say, and you look at the budgets, you look at the financial aspects of what's happening in the company, you look at the restrictions, the things that they are up against, maybe from a legal standpoint, and you really absorb that and you understand it and you educate yourself, you understand that your agenda is just blown completely out of the window because you went in not understanding what this company was up against or what these employees were facing. You then take the time to learn the system, understand and operate within, their parameters and within the requirements of what this company is facing at that time.
Right. I know this was something as a volunteer position that you did, but that actually relates back to any jobs, right? Don't go in with a set agenda. First, try to understand the culture, the environment, the people, the employees, the customers, and all that. Then make your changes. Right. So that applies to anybody.
Absolutely. And I think if you take that approach in everything, as you mentioned, in business, in your personal life, even when you're dealing with clients, you really succeed at that point because you don't have an agenda other than an agenda to succeed. And I think you're not going to fail if that's in cooperation with your partner, whoever that may be, an employee, a client, or a business partner. I think if you're looking,
that's true.
Yep. If you're looking at it from a perspective of we both need to benefit in this relationship, then you don't have an agenda. You can't have one because you don't know what you're going to come up against. I mean, if you don't sit from all sides, all angles, I think you really have to sit down and listen, because then at that point you're opening yourself up to what their feelings are and what their goals are. A perfect example is even when we're doing employee evaluations, you like to hear their feedback and understand from them where they believe they are, because it really helps you to not have an agenda and say, this is where they are. Let me hold on to that and build upon that, rather than say to them, this is your goal, this is where you need to be, and this is what I want to see accomplished. You say, where are you and where do you want to go? Where do you want to go? Excuse me. And sometimes we know we've been in this position. Sometimes those goals are out of their reach currently, but you help them build that path to that area. But you can't get there until you hear where they are at that time.
Right. And you and I are both moms, right? I mean, we both have kids. The same rule applies.
Same rules apply. You see how you can can apply in every situation.
Exactly.
And again, that goes back to this female leadership. I think we take every experience in our life and bring that into our careers and our leadership roles. And we govern that way. We lead that way.
Shannon, is there anything else that you would like our listeners to know?
I think really, if you think about our entire lives, everything connects to ag. Everything that we do in some form connects back to ag. My industry, of course, it's a raw product, so the grapes are grown and things of that nature, but we're a manufacturer, so you can take any business and really tie that from a science aspect to the medical aspect. We're all built on growing something. So if you understand that everything we do is based on growing, it takes you right back to the ag root.
So then, from a lesson learned from agriculture is, as you're growing, it could be anybody, right? You're growing
is
people,
evolving.
Relationships, whatever. You nurture, you feed, you take care of it, you take care of your environment, you nourish them. I think that all applies to agriculture. That's how. Right. That's agriculture. That's the industry. That's industry.
Definitely. And the nurturing and the caring for whatever you're growing, and that can be your career, that can be your children, it can be anything, but I think that is the foundation. Is everything that we do is planted. The seeds you plant are what you produce.
So Shannon, as we end our conversation, just looking at even your company and the company name, when I introduce you and say Monterey Wine Company, somebody might not know, is that a vineyard? What do you actually do? Can you explain that for our listeners?
Sure. So we do have our own products, but primarily the largest part of our business is basically making wine for other people. So a winery, let's say up in Napa, may be growing grapes in this region, and they need a facility for processing. And rather than trucking the fruit all the way up to Napa, which could hurt quality and things of that nature, they use our facility for producing. So we make some of the biggest names in the industry, some of the wines, and right here in these small ag communities, we'll produce very high-end wines, and then we send it back to their facility in Napa, and no one knows that it's been here. So that's really the benefit of a custom crush facility, is we allow them to increase their productions without having to build capital or build facilities. They can actually, any overproduction, they can process with us. And we take it from grape all the way to bottle if needed.
And so this is to augment maybe their production up in Napa, wherever they are. Okay.
We also, exactly that. That's the primary function of our business. But in the last couple, 5 to 10 years, I've really seen a turn in salespeople who, they're not in the wine business. They're not winery people, but they're salespeople, sales and marketing people. and they're looking for a brand. They just want to buy a brand from our company that they can get out and get in the wine market and sell it. So we're really starting to work with sales and marketing people now at this point. So
they really, just come to brand.
Yep.
They want a branded.
They'll come and say, I know this type of product is doing really well in the market.
Yep.
And I would like to sell this type of product. Can you help me make this product? I will take it to the market and I will sell it. So it's really changed over the years.
Yes, okay. So they have nothing. They don't know anything about the wine industry, but they just said, give me the product and I'll just sell it.
Right.
So they're selling it. Oh,
right. So we have that type of client as well.
No, I didn't know that part. So that's interesting. So,
they need a little more hand holding, of course, but some of them are very successful because they're good salespeople.
Shannon, this has been a really, really good conversation. And I know when we met, I said I was curious to learn a little bit more about you. And as I'm talking, we can take it in so many different directions and talk for hours, and I don't think we'll be done. But I've learned a lot. My curiosity, I'm even more curious. I need to know you more. So I definitely looking forward to a lot more conversations with you. So thank you so much for this. Any comments from you to end the show?
I appreciate it. First of all, thank you so much for having me. This has been wonderful. I really enjoyed this experience, and I think you doing these type of podcasts is just reaching so many people. We talked about that. I just really commend you doing such a good job with this, and it's nice to have you with United Ag and working with and having a relationship with you now. I'm really, really happy that we connected this way.
One of my previous guests gave me the best compliment. He said, I found a friend.
Absolutely.
So I am going to say that to you. I think, Shannon, I found a friend. I'm so looking forward to getting to know you more.
I felt like that when we had that first conversation. So I agree.
Yep. So cheers to friendship.
Cheers to friendship.